and this one. Okay. So I'm very excited to share this one with you all. It's a story that I've told many a time, and I'm excited to actually have written it out and to give it a proper read. So, are you all ready to hear The Thing in the Moonlight? I'm someone that appreciates understanding. I appreciate answers. Answers and understanding, they shine a light in the darkness and make our fears less looming. Or at least most of the time. I could explain away my experience, saying I was just a kid with an overactive imagination, or that I would later develop bipolar disorder. Maybe I was just sleep deprived. The answers, the understanding, while they might provide some semblance of an explanation, they don't erase the memories. They don't change what I saw. When I was a kid, I actually spent most of my time outside on the hill behind my house. We'd spend our days exploring new areas, building forts, stick fighting, all that classic kid stuff. It was one of these adventurous days. I think I was around 8 or so. We were out exploring a new area and climbing atop these big, dense bushes. I actually misstepped and fell down into the bushes and just onto the ground. My friends called out to me to make sure I was okay. Yeah, I was. I was perhaps a little scraped up, but if I was, you probably couldn't tell which of my scrapes were new among all the others I had collected the past couple of days. So, as I looked around to get a sense of how to climb back out, I noticed an odd thing in the dirt. It was kind of like a white plate or stone, but as I inspected it further, it was some sort of odd bone. Hell yeah! I immediately picked it up and inspected it. I had no idea what it was at the time. Even now, as I try to recall it, I think it may have looked like a pelvis, but it was flat, and it was large enough for me to wear as a mask. Honestly, the more I try to remember the details about it, the less I seem to be able to picture it, and the more uneasy I get. So, what's important is that I found a cool bone, and I had no idea what it was. I scrambled my way up on top of the bushes, and back to the nearby trail where my friends were waiting for, and I showed them my prize. We were all in awe by this huge unknown bone, and we resolved to find out what kind of animal it belonged to. So we set off back home. There we go. I can scroll now. Good. So when we got back, none of our parents seemed to know what it belonged to. But one of my friends insisted that his older sister would be able to identify it. So I left the bone at his house and got cleaned up, because later that night I was going to a birthday slumber party for a friend who lived down the street. Now, to be honest, most of that night was pretty unremarkable, and I've forgotten the details of what happened for most of the start of the night, but I remember the rest of it in vivid detail. After most of the festivities had died down and my friend's parents went to bed, us kids stayed awake playing video games in the living room. Most of us were spread out on the carpeted floor and some were on couches. People were playing Mario Party on the Rainbow Castle level, and I was just kind of hanging out and spectating. My eyes wandered a bit, and I found myself looking out the sliding glass back door to the backyard and the hill beyond that. Now, at this point, the moon wasn't out yet, and everything was just shrouded in darkness. However, something about the darkness made me uneasy, as if it wasn't just the hill I had come to know so well, as if it was something else out there. It wasn't a feeling I had felt before, and it wasn't one I enjoyed, so I looked away and went back to watching the game unfold. However, sometime later I felt the urge to look back to the hill, to determine if I could see what was making me so uncomfortable. I peered into the blackness beyond the fenced backyard. I could have sworn I could see something somehow darker than the darkness around it. I peered for a long while into that darkness, but its shape never seemed to take form. All I had was an idea that something was there. I wanted to nudge one of my friends, but what do I say? Hey, do you see that patch of darkness out there? No, I couldn't say anything, and I was likely just seeing things. Maybe it was a bush or something, so I just went back to watching the game. More time passed, and yet again I turned to look out the sliding glass door. This time something was there. Not something I could fully make out, but there was definitely something dark pressing up against the fence up to the backyard. I immediately got my friend's attention and asked them what the thing on the edge of the backyard was. Except nobody could see anything. There was something so definitely standing just outside the fence to the backyard, and yet somehow nobody could see it. People returned to playing the game, but I sat for a while longer, just watching. The shadow at the fence just stood there, unmoving. Maybe it was some trick of the light or a bush I hadn't noticed before? I returned to watching my friends play Mario Party. They were starting a game on Peach's birthday cake level now. Oh, how's it going, Swell? Welcome on in. Some time passed, and I began to see moonlight streaming in through the windows. Relieved to finally understand what I had been seeing in the darkness, I turned back to the glass door, expecting to see bushes. The bushes that I had expected. There, in the center of the backyard lawn, stark in the moonlight, was some monstrous creature standing tall, silent, and still in the moonlight. I couldn't quite make out its features. It wasn't that I couldn't see it clearly, but more that my mind didn't seem to want to process what it was seeing. Whatever it was, I knew for certain that it was there, and it had not been previously. I let out a cry and curled into a tight ball, clamping my eyes shut. My friends asked what happened, and I could only whisper that it was in the backyard. I heard shuffling as they all affirmed that there was nothing there that they could see, but I kept repeating that it was in the backyard. It was in the backyard. To my horror, I then heard them all go into the door, and I cried out for them not to open it, barely holding back sobs. They stopped and agreed whatever was out there must have been something that only I could see, and it was hunting me. Them being actually good friends, they all decided to sort of set up around me, like some sort of protective barrier. Once they confirmed I was okay, they returned to playing their games, but I remained in a ball with my eyes shut. Eventually, tiredness overcame everyone, and they shut down the N64, and they all settled in to fall asleep. Everyone, except me, who was still petrified in terror. I was so tired, though, I just wanted to sleep. Perhaps it really had all been in my head. I unwound from my ball and looked cautiously to the sliding glass door. And there, stood right up against the glass, was the creature, staring directly at me. Thank you, Maxim. The creature was staring directly at me. I yelped and wrapped myself back into a ball. Above my whimpering, the breathing of my peacefully sleeping friends, I could just barely make out the faintest tap, tap, tap on the sliding glass door. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap, tap. I don't know how long that went on for. I don't remember sleeping much that night. I remember seeing the first rays of sunlight creep into the room and rousing my nearest friend to check the backyard. Except they saw nothing. Emboldened by the light, I turned to face the backyard, and it was empty. There was nothing by the door. There was nothing in the center of the yard. There was nothing by the back fence, and there was nothing on the hill that would have been the darkness I saw. I sighed with relief. Later that next day, I went on to my other friend's house, the one who had held on to the bone, and explained what happened, and said we needed to return it. He agreed, and we returned to the same spot we found it. I tossed it back to the bushes, and we went home. After that, I largely forgot about the incident. Kids have a way of suppressing traumatic memories, I suppose. I mean, well, for the most part. Fast forward to my senior year of university. I was 21 years old, and I was taking a break from studying and just scrolling through Reddit. I came across a story of someone encountering a creature, something malicious, shrouded in darkness, covered in black fur, apart from an exposed animal skull. And suddenly I was a kid again, looking out through the sliding glass door at the towering quadrupedal figure covered in shiny, matted black fur, and a skull and antlers exposed, shining white in the moonlight where it wasn't dripping with gore. And then I'm back in the present, sitting in my small room in my apartment, over the sound of my heart beating, the blood in my ears rushing, over the sound of my ears ringing. I could just barely hear yet again that tap, 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 tap on the window, not more than 3 feet from me. I just sat there and I cowered for a few minutes. Eventually the tapping faded. Not daring to look out the window, I stood and I left my room, and I went back to our living room to go spend time with my housemates. I didn't tell them what I heard just then. I didn't tell them what I saw all those years ago. I knew they wouldn't believe me. And even if they did, they wouldn't be able to go see what hunted me. And yeah, so I just stayed there in the living room most of the evening until I got the courage to go back to my room, shut the blinds, and sleep with the light on. Fortunately, nothing like that has happened since, and I can't really explain it. Perhaps it was sleep deprivation, the early stages of mental illness, an overactive imagination, or something, but whatever it was, I know what I saw, and I will never be able to forget it again. And that is The Thing in the Moonlight, a genuinely true story as I remember it. So yeah,